Matthew Merritt, Cooke County Republican Chairman. How'd I get this job? You voted for me. You just don't know it. All right. 6,000 something if you vote for me every year. And thank you. Okay. So let's see here. Got the candidates here. Most everybody's in here. If not, please come on in, find your seat so we can get started. And so at this time, I would like to invite Ray Luke, the Associate Pastor of Cross Timbers Church in Valley View, to come on up here and say our invocation.
Lord God, we come to you asking for wisdom tonight. We ask for wisdom for our elected officials because we have so many critical issues going on in our communities, our county, our state, our nation. We ask for wisdom to deal with these issues. We ask for wisdom tonight for our candidates to be able to state their positions on the issues clearly and concisely. We pray for wisdom for voters, those of us who are here tonight and those that are not here, so that we can vote with wisdom. I pray for an enjoyable, peaceful, safe evening together, and we pray this in your name and go forth in your name. Amen.
All right. And as we start every Republican meeting with the invocation and also our pledges, I'll invite up Pauline Lesh. She's the Vice Chairman of the Cooke County Republican Party, and she'll lead us in our pledges. Please take it.
I don't really think this crowd needs me to say our pledges. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
All right. Thank you, Pauline, Vice Chair Extraordinaire. All right. At this time, we'll invite Kimsey Moss. She's our Secretary and also a Precinct Chair for the Cooke County Republican Party, and she will take it from here.
Thank you all for coming. So we were limited to 148 people downstairs, and it looks like we have barely stayed in that limit. We are happy that y'all came. Tonight, I want to say a couple of things. So Ray Luke, who gave our prayer, he just opened up his church when others wouldn't to the Cooke County Republican Women, and we just had a great program just a week ago from a nationally recognized speaker. And sorry, I'm not going to go down that bunny rabbit trail. Anyway, so we thank you so much. And then Pauline Lesh, she is not only the Vice Chair for our Cooke County Republican Party, she is a past President for the Cooke County Republican Women. She's current Secretary. She helps with so much stuff, and without her, I mean, she is the glue and the gas behind a lot of Republican things in this county. So we thank you very much. Okay, and then I want to introduce someone else. So Bob Kingsbury is here. He's our timekeeper. He is married to Carrie Kingsbury, who is out of town tonight, but he is going to be our timekeeper. He's going to be giving you 1-minute warnings and 30 minutes, and when your time is up and it's red, it's up. Right? We're obedient Republicans. Bob is married to our current president of the Cooke County Republican Women. And then we have Lane Holcomb in the back, and precinct chair. He'll be adjusting the volume or the lights if you need that. And then we have Dale Shaw, who is a veteran and married to Susan, who's also very active in both Republican Women and Republican Party. And he's our enforcer tonight to just maintain decorum. Okay, so how we're going to do this, we are limited to 50% capacity, so if for some reason we went over that, somebody let me know. So we had a panel of 6 people get together last Thursday, and they prepared the questions that I'll be asking from the stage. After those questions are answered, then it will be time for questions from the audience. So be thinking of any questions that you would like to ask. This time that we have organized is for you, the voters. So you can have your questions asked, you can be educated on who you want to vote for. We're going to start now with 3-minute introductions for each of the candidates. We've decided to go in the order of the Secretary of State, the way that they list them. So we're going to start here, and we have a wireless microphone that once you use your 3-minute introduction, if you will just pass it to the next person to your left. And you're welcome to stand up or sit, whichever.
My name is Craig Carter, and I want to thank you all for coming out and making the time to kind of just connect and see what we're all about today. My journey really started in this area in Nakona in 2016, and that journey for me really transitioned from my family moved out there, my dad has a place, my sister moved out there, and I really wanted to just get closer to my family. I've always been very tight-knit, and on the journey of starting to redo that building, there's just a lot of things that came up really fast on just that there's a lot of need, there's a lot of poverty. My factory at one point had about 500 jobs in it, and you start looking around and just trying to understand, how does an area get lifeless for 20 years, and how does, and where are the opportunities? And through that journey, we started Hope 2011 and started serving people through clothes and then through food, and that's grown, and at this point, we feed usually about 1,000 people every other Saturday, and then we disperse resources in the community. And that really, for me, was kind of the eye-opening side of how important jobs are. And having grown up in around Tarrant County my whole life, it's just different there. And seeing that, and I started really asking myself, well, how do you create jobs in Nakona? Because there's just not many opportunities. So I really focused from there, there moving forward is just trying to identify how do I, outside the box, do I do something cool here? And so I really got with the care of, we now have, I've opened 12 food stores. We got very focused on creating almost 100 jobs. We have Nakona Ball Gloves made in my factory, it's about 50 people doing that. We have Nakona Beer and Brewery, which redid the other end of the building for that. And through that journey, there were a lot of things that were needed. We needed high-speed internet. And so I was able to push that forward for all of Nakona because I'm creating all these jobs. We also needed a power grid. At one point, my building caught on fire because our power grid was so out of date, despite the building. You can't, you have to fix that infrastructure if you're going to keep moving forward. We fixed the water system. I got the road paved around there. All these different things on focusing on growing and focus on creating jobs. And so moving forward, that is my primary focus is how to, coming out of COVID, how do we focus on making Texas strong, creating jobs. And I'm a behind the scenes guy, I'm an outside the box thinker, I have a proven track record, very efficient on how do I find solutions that no one else is thinking about, and I'm committed to working just as hard as you guys do every day to make Texas great.
Good. I hope you guys enjoy the weather today. This is so much better, isn't it? It's good meeting y'all. My name is Andy Hopper, and I am running for Texas Senate District 30. I am a software engineer, I am a small farmer, and I am a warrant officer in the Texas State Guard. I am running for District 30 because I love Texas, and I 100% of the belief that the best folks to decide what is right for Texas are Texans, and not 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and unelected judges basically forcing their will on our way of life. I am 100% certain that Donald Trump's going to win this election this fall. I think he's absolutely got this. but I think that we need to come to terms with the fact that we need strong conservatives in the legislature that over the coming years will protect our way of life against all these different court decisions that are chipping away at our ability to even decide whether or not we're going to allow abortion in the state, for instance. So I feel very strongly about that. In addition, I'm very passionate about the idea that the best way to become a big farmer is to start as a small farmer. And as a small farmer, having encountered nothing but regulatory hurdles, I am 100% of the belief that we can make some improvements that basically don't hurt the big ag people, that allow young folks to get into ag. If you're in ag, you probably have a pesticide license. You probably go to these extension office classes, which is great because you meet all the folks in the county and they are so knowledgeable and you just pick their brain all day. But the thing I notice is there's not very many young folks in there, and that's folks that people I talk to all over the state. They say the same thing. I mean, there's not young folks getting into farming. We've got to change that. And there's some things I'd like to talk to you about tonight there that I truly believe will make a difference. Lastly, when talking to folks the last couple of weeks, I mean, the thing that I felt and I now recognize that everybody is worried about their property taxes. I mean, our property taxes we thought were capped to something more reasonable after 2018. When folks actually went through the last dispute with their CAD, they realized I'd still go up 10% a year. So we have some things that need to happen right ASAP to put some reasonable caps on our property tax and give residential owners a little bit of a leg up against the commercial tax. And I'd like to talk to you about that tonight as well. But make no mistake, I'm against the property tax system. We need to move to a consumption tax in Texas. There's been lots of proposals out there that I think make really good sense. And I think that, in the next few years, we need to actually try to take steps in Texas to move away from the property tax. Hey, I really appreciate y'all having me tonight. I am really looking forward to talking to you. I like nothing better than to talk about my views. That's what I do. Every time I corner somebody in our house, and sit down around a fire and just sit there and just plaster them with weird ideas. So that's what I like to do for tonight. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Shelley Luther. Most people know me as the Dallas salon owner that opened against the ordinance and went to jail. Oh yeah, thanks. Nobody cheers. I mean, everybody always cheers for me going to jail. It's kind of weird, but that's what happened. What you don't know about me is I live in Pilot Point with my family. I have a daughter that goes to Pilot Point High School. She's a senior. My dad retired as a master gunny sergeant in the Marines, 26-year veteran, which I'm really proud of. And a lot of people ask me where I get that courage from. Why was I able to stand up? And I really think that has a lot to do with my dad, because I'm sitting there in the salon, the government wasn't helping us, and I didn't know what to do. And when they said that they didn't care that if I fed my kids or not, I knew something was wrong. And so I just thought, what would my dad do here? And I knew that he would stand up. So I did. And he will be here next weekend, which makes me really happy, so he can see all of the things that I'm doing, because obviously our lives have been completely flipped upside down in a good way. I think as far as a political office goes, my best asset is that I'm not a politician. I know a lot about... Go on. I'm considered one of...
Let's go ahead and do this, and I will switch out to that.
Is this better? Yes. Thank you. All right. So I'm not a politician. That doesn't mean I don't know about politics. What that means is I'm not going to Austin to rub elbows and take money from lobbyists. That's what that means. I am one of you. I can close the gap between Austin and you. When COVID hit, I was one of you, and I know exactly how it felt. So when I go up there to help make decisions for you, I'm not going to make decisions that will hurt you, because I know how it felt. What I want you to know is I'm pro-life. I want to completely abolish abortion. I think Texas should have done that a long time ago. I also think that Texas should be one of the first states, which it's not, to have constitutional carry. Our Second Amendment right has been violated way too long, and I will definitely lead in that as well. So there's a lot of things that I want to talk to you guys about. I know enough about politics to read or ask the right people what to do, but the one thing that a lot of politicians don't have is moral and character, and I definitely have that. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Drew Springer, your state representative here in Cooke County, and I see some folks that come in from Monte County. And it's great to be with y'all tonight. This is stop number 57 so far during this short election cycle. I'd like to start with thanking my wife Lydia for being here, my wife of 29 years, and also my son and daughter-in-law came, and our newest grandson was able to join us as well. It has been an honor to be your public servant for the last 8 years in Cooke County and fight for the values that we have, Christian, conservative, Texas values in the Texas House. I've got a track record that proves those issues, whether it's fighting against taxpayer-funded lobbies. Mays Middleton, the Freedom Caucus chairman, who offered HB 281 as well as carried Senate Bill 29, will tell you that if it wasn't for Chairman Dave Phelan and myself, that bill would have never made it through state affairs. And so it's my pleasure to look forward to, again, fighting for that when we get back down there again. And we've talked to other Republicans. We know we have to move on that issue. The other ones that we're doing, we were able to defend our Christian values against companies, actually 4 companies, against San Antonio and other cities that want to tell them that if you give money to the Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, you can't do business in their city. That's wrong. I was proud to be one of the authors of that bill to make sure that we passed that. Second Amendment, I'm A+ rated with the NRA and endorsed with them because of all the bills that I have helped carry them for the years that we've done, from suppressors to fingerprinting to open carry to constitution to working on constitutional carry and campus carry that we passed. And from there, working with our law enforcement. What we're doing today in defunding law enforcement, what we're seeing the city of Austin do and others is terrible. That's why I'm endorsed by the Texas Municipal Police Association and the Dallas Police Association on those. Big business. We did a tour for the last 2 days with the NFIB because small business is the backbone of Texas. And I'm proud to be endorsed by the NFIB for the work, for the fact that when cities overstep their bounds and say they can set minimum wages and paid sick leave, that's wrong. I had the bill to fix that, and also on property taxes. We have too much. I had the bill last time, and I'll file it again, that would have eliminated half of the M&O property taxes, which is over half of your property taxes. We'll do it again. It goes to the plank of the Republican Party that says we're going to be a consumption-based tax system, and I fully believe in that. It's been a pleasure to serve everybody, to travel to 14 counties, and I look forward again to visiting with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Chris Watts. Currently serve as the mayor of the city of Denton. Served there for 6.5 years, and also served as the city council for 6 years. But to stand on this stage with all these fine people who are putting themselves out here to make a difference for our state, no matter who wins, I just applaud you and thank you for standing up and wanting to serve the community. Absolutely. But if you'd have told a little 12-year-old boy that was in a station wagon with a single mom and his 2 brothers, 2 dogs, and a car full of clothes, that I'd be standing here, it'd be insane. We were there because my mom had a domestic violence altercation with her then partner. And we had to get out, and thank goodness that she had the courage and the resolve to remove herself from that situation and remove us, her kids. We were able to get help from a local church, get some housing, get on our feet. Worked hard through high school, worked hard through college, put myself through college by paying family bills, got a master's degree in counseling education, student services, a bachelor's in computer science, and then put myself through law school. And that journey taught me many, many things. First of all, it taught me that it would never happen without faith and grace. There's no way I could be standing here today without that leadership and that guidance of my relationship with God to get me to the place where I can begin to serve others instead of just serving myself. Part of that service in Denton was as a volunteer for CASA, a court-appointed special advocate. that basically advocates for children who have been removed by CPS for abuse and neglect in the court system. And I can tell you some stories about that that are quite remarkable on how some of these kids are resilient, but they still needed help and they needed mentoring and they needed advocacy in the court system. I then began to think about how can I serve the community even more, so I ran for city council. One thing I will tell you, even though I've been in an office, a political office for 12 years, I'm not a politician. My goal is to make sure that your voice is heard in Austin. Unfortunately, the voter's voice is beginning to reduce and reduce and reduce. I've been endorsed by the Texas State Association of Firefighters, by the International Association of Firefighters Local 1291, which is the Denton Fire Department, and by the Denton Police Officers Association. I'm committed to public safety. We're not defunding the police in Denton. We're raising the budget. We're adding officers. We're adding a mental health unit. We're going to make sure that we take care of our citizens and they're safe in their community. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. So we have a system here. Our timekeeper, Bob Kingsbury, he'll be giving you 2 minutes for each of these questions. So we had a panel get together last week, came up with 5 questions, and after those 5 questions, again, 2 minutes for your answer. You don't have to use it all, but I have in here each of your names. So I'm going to draw out of here your name, and that's the order that we're going to do each question. Okay? Everybody's got the rules? Okay, so question number 1 is, how do you view the real property tax issue as it impacts rural communities? And Craig Carter is first.
The property tax issue goes, being a businessman, not a politician, and hearing the same talks about we're going to fix property tax, we're going to fix property tax. I've owned over 100 properties, and I have dealt with property tax all the way from the side of being overtaxed to an evaluation that's over-evaluated to my dad being a farm and rancher and having multiple parcels of property to he's fixing to retire, and our conversations switch gears. He's like, my property's paid for, but I have cows and this is how much income it brings in, and I can't afford both these properties. I'm gonna have to sell one of my properties based on property tax. And he lives in a dirt road in Nakona in Monte County, and that is like when you have those conversations, like when I say I'm going to go after finding a solution, I'm going to find a solution, but it's going to look very different than everyone else just keep talking about it. Hey, we fixed it. Oh, it dropped $100. We have serious issues with property tax from the rural areas to the city areas, and we need to be outside the box thinking about that. And that's one of the things I'm going to bring to Austin is, I have a history of being an efficiency expert on looking at things a little differently and pulling in the right teams, the right task force to say, we are going to solve this, and we're going to go after it every day, like every hardworking Texan out there. And this is going to become such an important issue on the backside of COVID and how that's going to affect, everyone and how our country moves forward. In Texas here, we are going to have to be laser focused on finding a solution and putting in whatever hours it takes to find that solution. And I will commit that I will go after making that happen.
Thank you. And next. Andy Hopper.
I have some interesting views on this. One of the things I did when I first started this is went out and talked to as many mayors, as many county judges as I could, and the feedback I get, as far as the package rule, government, is the fact that there's so many unfunded mandates from Austin down at the local level, and it just causes governance and being able to get revenue to be able to address all the city's needs. I mean, it's a problem, and the reason that the government does this down in Austin and puts these unfunded mandates in place is, because we have people like Austin that are basically defunding the police and doing crazy things, annexing places that can't do that now, thank God, but they can still basically charge people for services that maybe an enclave municipality used to charge this much, and now they're being paid twice as much. I mean, there's reasons that I think that these unfunded mandates have been put in place, but I think that the root cause for some of the rural government, some of the way that affects, rural Texas and SD 30, I think is that, first of all, our school taxes are out of control and people know that this is unsustainable and there's some things that we need to do. Very quickly, my feeling is that we can get school choice and vouchers in place. I think that will put positive pressure. The invisible hand of Adam Smith will actually then say, okay, well, if I'm a homeschooler, if I'm going to a private school, and I can use that money, those two examples are ones that you basically are expecting to get the most out, but still want to pay the least. And that is exactly what you want. Right now, that pressure is not on the school district. So I think we can get the school funding out of control, that's out of control now, and we can get it in check. I think that's number one. I think number two is, I think we need to absolutely look at moving to a consumption tax-based solution. The Texas Policy Institute has some really, really good literature out there. I mean, basically, we're looking like a 7% tax, sales tax, and we can actually eradicate the entire property tax system, which I think is a terrible system. I mean, the idea that I can't go live on some property, farm on it, and now I have to collect enough greenbacks to go pay the tax man to rent my property from the government. That's one thing Greg Abbott is absolutely accurate about. Rent is nothing less than renting property.
Okay, we're gonna pause
Yeah.
here.
Well,
Do we need to switch the microphone? Do we want them to stand to this one?
Yes.
Lane, do you want them to stand to this one?
Yeah, I think it'd be better for you to, I know
Or just
before there'd
pass
be a
this
little bit of
one?
a problem, but move back to each one, and then
Okay.
you just use the cordless one for short periods.
Okay. So the next one to answer that question, again, is how do you view the rural property tax issue as it impacts the community? I am taking this in order out of Shelley Luther.
Okay, so we live in Pilot Point on 5 acres, and I know one of the issues is the land not being included with your house, and it's confusing as a first-time buyer with rural properties, so I know that's definitely an issue. The other thing is, if legislatures, they say, oh, we'll get your property taxes down, and then they appraise your house, and it's something crazy. And so what I want to do to fix that issue is I think that appraisal boards or appraisal districts should be elected positions. That way we can hold them more accountable and they can't just do whatever they want to do. So that's one thing that I would like to do. The other thing is, I think that we have a lot of spending going on in Austin that can help us fund some of these school taxes where we don't have to pay for these taxes, especially if we're over 65 and we've had kids out of school for years and years and years. The government spending I'm talking about is subsidies, corporate welfare, where, oh, Toyota or Tesla, Governor Abbott says, we'll pay you $50 million to come here and you don't have to pay taxes for 10 years. Why? Texas is awesome. We don't need to bribe people to come here, number one. Number two, I think that taxpayer-funded lobbying is going on to where your cities are using your property taxes to work against you, which should be illegal, and we need to ban that. So basically, they're paying lobbyists to do things that you do not want using your taxes. That definitely needs to be banned. So there are lots of things that Austin can do to help us with our property taxes, but I think the main thing is lowering spending in general. Lower it at Austin level. That will help us with school taxes and get those appraisal districts under control. Thanks.
Thank you, Shelley. I did shake them up. Republicans are very orderly people.
Thank you. You know, when it comes to rural property taxes, one of the biggest challenges we face is that our valuation, our piece of the pie for homeowners fluctuates quite a bit with the minerals that are under the ground. So when minerals drop in the counties and the cities and the schools stay at the same level, that piece of the pie shifts over to us. We need to look at ways of normalizing that. It's two pieces, though, that we did last session that I think is extremely important. One, on that school tax. When we see that 10% increase of appraisals, and that's what the market value is, If the market value is wrong, we have a system to be able to protest that, and we had numbers that protested here in Cooke County, and they moved through fairly quickly without having to go to court. But you also have the ability on those that we have a 2.5% cap, that schools can no longer grow higher than that. We bought down property taxes for the M&O $5 billion. So we went from $1.04 to about 94 cents on average. Within next year, we're gonna lower that again to 92 to 98 cents on average. So we're seeing those tax cuts come. But if you're in that and you're growing faster than 2.5, we have to backfill that, and the only thing we really have left from a state is consumption tax. I talked about earlier, the consumption tax, how we can give a 50% homestead exemption. I'd love to make it 100% homestead exemption on the M&O. But some of our towns don't have a sales tax base that they can run their cities. And that's why we have the no new tax rate, which used to be called the effective rate. And we've tried to educate the citizens and make it simpler for them to understand who is raising their taxes. It's not the fact that their value of their property went up in Munster, Texas. It's the fact that they didn't adopt the tax rate that was the effective rate or the no new tax rate. And so those are the where we need to put our focus on, making sure people understand that that's where we're at. We need to continue to work to go more of a consumption tax. Come on up, Chris.
Thank you, Drew.
The question was, how does the last legislative session affect the rural property tax in the district? Denton has a $1.4 billion budget this year proposal. Over the last 5 years, we have lowered the tax rate from 69 cents to 58 cents, basically adopting the effective tax rate, the no new tax rate. I also have a business where I represent property owners at the appraisal district to get their valuations down to reduce their property. The minutia in the Senate bill that passed, unfortunately, if you're in a high growth, high valuation increase of your appraisals in those type of cities, then you'll hit that 2.5% cap pretty quickly. And then the state comes in and backstops it. If you are a rural county and your appraisals stay flat, okay, you don't have an increase, then that 2.5 cents, that 2.5%, they may have to raise rates to get to that in order to get the state to backstop. So I think that's something we need to look at very clearly and intently in this next legislative session. Because when you have legislation like that big, as I've seen when we work on the Denton City Council, you can have unintended consequences. And I think that's an unintended consequence for rural areas. Because the largest property tax component of your tax bill are school taxes. And the state is solely responsible for funding public education. And we need to fund public education. The consumer tax, we have to be careful because studies show that may only affect 20% of the population, where 80% will experience a tax increase because they may not own property. And so now we're going to be taxing with sales tax all these different services that you're not paying taxes on right now. It needs to have careful consideration, careful analysis to make that decision so that we don't have an unintended consequence.
Thank you, Chris Watts. Okay, let's see if we can put all these back in here and get a different order this time. Okay, so the next question, oops, did you read all those? So the next question is, where do you stand on prison reform in Texas in light of our current prison population? Craig Carter. Do you want somebody else to go first?
No. So I think when it comes to lots of different areas, and we really need to look at it in a new set of eyes. There's so much that we talk about, how we want to reform things, how we want to change things, but it all comes back to, 25% of every dollar that's spent through our government is wasted. And there are ways to streamline that. There are ways to look at what impact we're having. And I want to be focused on each one of these issues of really getting to the core issue of how do we, stop, back up, and go, how do we get this more efficient? How do we, fix what the issues are? And none of these tasks are easy. If they were easy, they would already be running smoothly. But my journey in Nakona, people over and over have said, you can't change anything in Nakona. This is how it is. That's how it's going to be. You can't change anything. And I don't buy into that. I buy into that with hard work and dedication and prioritizing the issues, you can dive into what is at the heart of it. And at the heart, you've got to turn to making sure you're pulling in experts in that field. You don't have to know everything. You just got to know who to bring on your team to get results. And so in these type of issues, I will pull in experts in those fields, get their opinions, look at it creatively, and go after some new creative ideas on how to help prison reform.
Thank you. See if I can do it.
We talk about backing police, but I have family members that are in law enforcement, and one of the things I hear from them. But anyways, one of the things I hear from them is the fact that it's the case that when you put somebody in prison in say a city like Dallas, you have to usually let somebody out. I mean, it's that full of rust at the scene. And it doesn't seem like we're really serving our law enforcement very well when we're letting folks out back on the streets that we, just in order to put somebody, in the slammer. And it's not ideal. I mean, that's one aspect of our prison system. I mean, that's the highest level. I mean, the long-term, prison system is as a whole different ballgame. But I mean, I will say this. I mean, a couple of things that I've learned over the past few years is that, by the way, I still support capital punishment, and I think we need to have, punishment that actually deters crime. But I also have read, and I think that it's true, that, one of the things in Texas we need to look at is the fact that we have the highest rate of exonerations of folks that are put in prison and we found that's wrong. So we definitely don't want to have both of those two statistics of having a state that is us, the highest capital punishment state, and also the one's the highest exoneration state. I would definitely support the legislature, having some sort of a committee to look into what is the reason for this and why, what can we do to solve it. But I definitely think that if we need to build more prisons because we can't enforce our laws and we can't deter our crime, I think that we need to do so because I think we're doing a disservice to our cops to keep it the way it is.
Chris Watts.
What a complicated issue. What we don't want to do is what New York is doing. And that is basically, as people get arrested, they're basically let out with no bail, no bond. It really doesn't even matter the extent of the crime. And so that's the first thing we have to understand is, first of all, we are a rule of law state. We need to ensure that people abide by the rule of law. There's no reason to be reducing bail or letting people out who committed violent crime. How many of you remember, you see it all the time, when you hear a news story about someone who's got arrested or some violent crime that occurred and there's a victim that's either been killed or seriously injured. They talk about the record that that person had had. And oftentimes they talk about that they may have been out from prison, from jail, on bail while they perform that crime. We need to bifurcate and make a distinction between low-level property crimes, where there's really a very minimal risk of a violent crime, and to ensure that violent criminals, bail is appropriate to where it's going to provide a deterrent and it's going to provide safety to our community. The last thing we need to do is be turning out violent criminals because someone else is going to be a victim, and we cannot have that. It's a very complicated issue. We need to make sure that we have the correct funding. We need to make sure we look at all operations of the prison system. There's got to be ways in a budget that large that you can find efficiencies of scale, and that you can cut costs while still maintaining public safety by making sure that those that are going to harm you stay where they really need to be.
Chris, let's try this again. Drew Springer.
Thank you. And in the last decade, the number of people jailed in the state of Texas has been decreasing. But too many times, we're keeping those non-violent offenders out while we're letting those that are violent, out while we're keeping the non-violent offenders in. But at the same time, we do have to respect the rule of law. And if you're a shop owner and somebody steals $700 worth of stuff from you, and we turn and we have cities that say, we're not going to prosecute those. We're not going to send those people to jail. It is just right for you to be run over. So we also have to be able to address those. We have to come up with alternatives, ones that have been tested and proven to be true. Drug rehab courts for low-level drug users to be able to get clean, to go through treatment, to get tested, versus sitting 6 months in jail while we pay for it. If they'll clean their lives up and we can monitor them, we should be looking at that for jail reform. We had a bill last session for low-level marijuana that would have moved it from a Class B to a Class C. We would have had money coming in if they'd have paid a $500 to a $1,000 ticket, versus the fact that we spend over $1 billion in the state of Texas incarcerating people with low-level, that's 1 to 2 joints of marijuana. And we've got to ask ourselves, for a first-time offender, is that really where we want to spend our tax dollars? So we've got to be open to those kind of ideas and say, is this where we want to go? But we've got to make sure those violent offenders stay locked up. We keep the jail spaces for them. And then lastly, we also have to make sure our county jails are not our mental health hospitals. The biggest mental health facilities in the state of Texas is our county jails, and it's wrong. We need to set up the beds at the state level to get them the treatment to save the county the tax dollars it's costing them now as well.
Okay, I guess I'm the expert here since I think I'm the only one that's been to jail. Okay, so I would like to say that one of the main reasons why Texas is increasing the amount of people going to jail is we're letting too many liberals in our state, number one. And seriously. Because if you look at Dallas is where all the trouble happened with my salon, and Drew is right. You could rob a store of $749 worth of stuff and they won't even handcuff you. You will not even get arrested. But I went to jail because I wanted to feed my kids. The looters and rioters could throw a brick through your window and the police won't even come. And they could burn my salon down and they tell me just walk away. There's nothing they can do. Those are the liberal cities. And we do not want that coming up to District 30. So you make sure you vote on that. Now, when I was in jail, what I noticed was a lot of people in there, you have the attention. I taught high school for 13 years. You have the direct attention of all of these women for 23 hours because they sat in that cell for 23 hours doing nothing. Why aren't they being taught a trade? Because they're going to go out, have nothing to do because they don't know what to do, and they're going to do the same offense again because that's all they know. So what I suggest is making sure while they're in there, teach them a trade, give them the help they need, give them the medication that they need, so they don't go out and do the same offense again and they're reoccurring. When I was put in jail, they were letting out rapists and murderers. But you could still steal and they'll put you in jail. It's crazy. And so please, first of all, please make sure you vote and your friends vote so this doesn't bring up the liberals to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. So I will refill our little bowl there, but I want to give you more time for the question. And the question is, oh yeah, you're going to have the magic touch. Okay. So the question question is, how do you propose to protect rural county schools from undue influence from state regulations? Okay? The first one is Chris Watts.
Well, I think one of the things I've already mentioned, that you want to make sure that you have a fair property tax system. But what the question really asks is, how can you have local control with your school districts and have less control from Austin on your locally elected officials and those in the meeting? Because you all know what's best for your kids in your school district. So I think that's number one thing you have to do is you have to say, look, we've got to have some parameters on this local control. And honestly, I've been an elected official for the city for 12 years, and I don't know what all the animosity is about with local control and the state legislature. I don't know why we're fighting so much. We need to quit fighting as much to understand that there's some things the state needs to regulate. Like in Denton, we voted, the citizens voted to ban hydraulic fracturing. I did not vote on that. I voted against that. But the citizens did, and the state legislature said, look, you can't do that, because you can't have every city doing it. All right, so that's what you have to do, is find those boundaries for local control. We've got to look at the tax system again to make sure that it's not harming them. And secondly, we've got to figure out how can we provide high-speed internet connectivity and infrastructure to the rural areas in this district. Last session, there was a bill passed that gave $200 million to the telecom industry, with no commitment to pass those costs along to the customers, and with no ask to try to put some of that money back to provide high-speed internet in rural areas. Well, I don't know about y'all, but when I negotiate a deal, if somebody's going to ask me for $200 million, I think I'm going to ask them for something back to help the kids in our rural districts. Thank you. Thank you.
Bruce Springer.
This one's an easy one. I've done that for 8 years in Austin. We would see these bills that come up to fix. Houston ISD, one of the largest school districts in the the United States, over 275,000 kids. And then we come up with things, and my favorite one was, we want to know where the school counselors are on your website every hour, and it's got to be updated. So I come to the back line, I file my amendment, it says, I bracket out all school districts below 5,000. Now, I had to apologize last week to the superintendent of Wiley, because he has 17,000. He said, I wish you'd have got us out of that too, because that's not a problem we're facing. In our small schools, everybody knows where the school counselor is, and they're in the same one building, and everybody just walks up if they have a question on that to deal with that. So we can't allow ourselves to have legislation be one size fits all. And that is why they call me Captain Bracket, because I would bracket out small schools from those issues that face them. Because we know what's best to deal with our kids. If that's a problem, we'll handle that at the local level. And so from that school district perspective, those are what I've worked on. It's as simple as saying, we have one that says you have to have a certified exterminator to come out and get a rat. In Jayton, Texas, that's 180 miles to the first person that could come out. What's wrong with common sense of putting out a mousetrap, put a little cheddar on it, and letting it kill the mouse? And so, we do those type of things, and those are the solutions we have to fight for. But we have to work with our peers and understand. Houston ISD may have a problem, but we need to tell them to draft the legislation to fix their problems now. Not in Denton ISD, not in Sainer ISD, and not in Gainesville ISD.
So one of my top priorities when it comes to teachers, they are our leading line on our next generation. And their commitment that they go after every day they keep showing up, they keep, raising the next generation. I've watched, lots of teachers around Nakona and their impact. They know the kids that are struggling. They know the kids that are in, challenging homes, and just their commitment to that. And, so one of my commitments is to really go after finding, back to streamlining and finding the resources that are being wasted to make sure that our teachers are being paid, better than any other state. We need our teachers being focused, and if you talk to most teachers, they're pulling money out of their pocket to go buy supplies, and we need to fix that. We need to make sure we're putting the resources for them to be rock stars in their classroom, that they can focus on, teaching the next generation. And my commitment as a businessman in being focused on those resources, I fought for 3 years to get fiber to Nakona so everyone could have fiber in Nakona. That was not going to happen without pushing and going after it. And directly, those type of things that you go after, you need those resources so that they have the tools to be what, with technology where it's going, that didn't exist because the internet was so slow there. And we've got to move forward with keeping them up to date with technology and being focused on prioritizing our schools and our teachers and moving forward on having a strong next generation.
Well, I may have mentioned we are a homeschool family. 3 of my boys are just outstanding, and they turned out great. My oldest is here. He's a mechanical engineering major at Texas Tech, and he's in the state guard with me as well, so very proud of him. And the reason that I mention that is because I am definitely in favor of local control in the sense that we wanted the infinitely, the local control that was like the most granular that you could possibly imagine, which is in our home. The reason we got started with that is because the absence of local control, the Department of Education in Title I school districts, which we lived in Decatur, most people think we didn't have Common Core in Texas. Well, if you're in a Title I school district, years ago there was something called C-Scope, which was basically Common Core, where they basically, my son was, come home with a math problem, a bunch of things that were marked wrong. I said, I'm an engineer, that's correct. I took it to the teacher, and they said, well, we have to be fair. We can't grade his right if we didn't do it for everyone. So, we're just going to leave it wrong. That kind of mentality is why folks recoil against any sort of requirements pushed down from the state or the federal level, because they want local control. On the other hand, we've got, probably Austin will teach you there's 8 genders. And we've got to put a stop to that. There's reasons why the state of Texas basically wants to assert and say, push down different requirements, because there's some real crackpots in the state that do really weird things. And I don't think the local school districts are really inclined to do so, but if you look at it at the macro level, I think we definitely have some problems in some of these big cities. So, anyways, I think the answer, my own personal opinion, is to embrace the idea of school choice, because I think that a rising tide lifts all ships. And I think that if we could get to the point where folks would basically say, hey, I can hit the road, I can distance learn my kids, and that works. I can do it in public school, I can charter school, I can sit there and homeschool, and all those things will basically kind of change for the better, I think, that the local school experience for everybody. So I think we'll end up with more local control. So, thank you.
So I think the biggest problem with public schools right now is we need to get Planned Parenthood away from our schools, completely away from our schools. And there's something going on right now in Austin where they're trying to include very drastic sex education, like explicit and disgusting sex education in lower grade levels of school. And if the state implements it, that means it goes across the board. We do not want that in our schools. Go ahead, Austin. You do that. Have your weird, but not in our schools, number one. They also want to talk about LGBTQ and all of those other things that is not as prominent out here. And we as parents should have parent choice and have responsibility to teach our kids what we want them to learn at a certain age. And I think that goes for parent choice of school as well. We are the parents, we decide what's best for our kids, and if we don't want our kids learning those things, then we should have the right to say no. So my first thing would say, Planned Parenthood needs to go, and I will work in Austin to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. So I'm going to take a minute to remind everybody that this is our last prepared panel question. And after that, we have 2 microphones, one in each aisle, and you can come up and you can direct a question to a particular candidate, or to all candidates. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but oh my gosh. No, that was just 3 questions. Sorry, I needed to turn the page. Turn the page. Yeah, it's a good song. Okay, so what are the 3 most important legislative items in the 2021 session? No, I guess, no, that was 2 of them. I know. Drew Springer.
You know, the top 3 legislative priorities we have to do coming into this next session is we have to make sure that we're reducing property taxes. We've talked about it tonight, and if there's any place that any of us go, we hear from every single one that property taxes is too high. Primarily, we hear it from our homeowners that are tired of renting their houses. So we have to look to go what the Republican platform calls for. You know, as somebody who is, you know, campaigned for the Republican Party for years and years, knowing that when we go to conventions, these are the things that we put forward on those. So we've got to make sure we're doing that. We've got to look at constitutional carry / permanentless carry. It doesn't matter what definition you have, there are going to be basically the same. It says, I have a license to carry. If somebody wants to exercise that same right that I have without the reciprocity with other states, they should have that right. Because today, especially as we see our police departments, we saw the Texas State Troopers overrun in Austin when the marauders came to tear the place down. There's not enough police to take care of these movements that we see that come through. And number 3, we've got to defend our monuments and make sure that they are not torn down. They are our history. And we need to, again, pass that through the Senate, and we need to push it through the House. And so those are the top 3 things we need to work on.
Chris Watts.
This will probably be the most difficult legislative session in decades for the legislature this upcoming year. Why? Because they're looking at a $4 billion deficit. $4 billion deficit. How do you make that up? How much do you use the rainy day fund? One of the first things that I would like to do down as your Texas Senator for District 30, we've got to look at the emergency declaration laws. All right, as a mayor, I can declare an emergency in the last 7 days. After that, it's got to be ratified by the city council, those people who are elected by the citizens. What we've seen is there's been declaratory powers that have extended beyond many, many months from the governor's office. And it's not just Governor Abbott, it's any governor. We've got to have a way that the people's voice can be heard. We've got to find a way to trigger a special session. We've got to find a committee of House and Senate members who can convene with the governor to make sure that he or she is not overstepping their bounds. Number 2, we've got to make sure that the Medicaid 1115 waiver, which is a $25 billion grant from the federal government to help rural hospitals pay for uncompensated care, that is expiring in 2022. It's got to get resolved this year. We have to do that. If not, many of our rural hospitals and rural health care will just go by the wayside, as they already have. And lastly, we need to continue to work on how do we get property taxes lower without unintended consequences to the rural school districts? And how can we continue to have a plan to move high internet connectivity to our rural areas to help both our students and our agricultural businesses where they can utilize technology to the fullest?
So, of course, with all the things that I've been through lately, I think that we need more freedom and less government. We need to go back to the Constitution, definitely. So what that means is going back to that 1975 Disaster Act, putting some regulations on there so the current governor or any future governor will never be able to shut us down ever without a special session. And I mean never. They did not have the authority to do that. So I want to make sure that that never happens to us, small businesses, schools, ever again. The second thing I want to do is make abortion illegal. I want to completely abolish abortion. It's long past due in Texas. The third thing I want to do, which goes along with the Constitution, is constitutional carry. I am endorsed by Texas Gun Rights, and they want me to carry the bill through the Senate. So that means that you get your Second Amendment rights back because they've been taken from you. It means that if you can legally purchase a gun, you can carry it anywhere without a license, without government regulations, and you don't have to pay for anything because it's your unalienable right to have a gun. Thank you.
So let me say I totally agree with Chris and Shelley that the first thing that has to happen is we got to clarify the idea that there needs to be a special session if this ever happens again. Personally, I think we're off the reservation. I don't think there's any laws that actually exist right now that gave some of the powers that are being leveraged to exist. I think that the governor only has the ability to suspend law, not create new law. But that's definitely the first thing. I think the second thing we need to do is look at property tax, and I think that definitely goes with school choice. I think that those two things go together because it's going to create a situation where we can actually start to see a decrease in the increase of the rise of our biggest driver of our property taxing, which is schools. Thirdly, I cannot say enough, I am definitely a 10th Amendment constitutionalist. There is no few and enumerated power assigned to the federal government that gives them the right to overrule the state of Texas and the will of Texans on the idea that we don't believe abortion should occur in the state. And every single thing that we do, whether it's just saying, hey, you must educate someone when they go through an abortion clinic, or we're not going to do egregious partial birth abortion procedures, or we're going to inform them of information. And every single one of those things, the federal courts systematically, we've got to stop sending money to Washington to pay for abortions with our tax money. It's absolutely immoral. I don't know if that's true or not, but those are definitely things I'm passionate about. Also, constitutional carry, and remember the Alamo. Those two things go together. You cannot talk about the idea that we should be armed Texans unless we sit there and remember the fact that we're sending the Alamo and putting in the hands of UNESCO, which is the United Nations organization, and it's going to be reimagined as something other than a shrine of Texas liberty. We have to absolutely stand for our monuments, but that also means arming Texans to be able to protect them. Thank you.
The number one priority will be property tax. Behind that will be number two, which will be reinforcing how property tax affected with our teachers, what teachers are paid, our education. And behind that, number three will be going after funding correctly first responders, our police departments, and then coming back to being a businessman, not a politician, that I'm going to dive into. You cannot cut anything if you can't fund it. And I have to balance my budget every month. I have to pay my 100 employees. I have to keep moving my businesses forward. And I will take that skill set and I will start diving into how do we eliminate waste and how do we take those funds and how do we fix these issues, and not through cutting, but by growing revenues through new projects and focus on moving Texas forward instead of trying to eliminate or cut, and that's going to be my top priority.
Mr. Chair? Okay, so while Chris is doing that, and the last question that's prepared is, what is is your plan for encouraging economic development in the state? Want to pick our first one, Chris?
Here's why.
Well, I agree with Shelley that in a level playing field, we don't need to have anybody give any incentives to come to Texas. Because Texas is the greatest state in the union. And we've all seen that. We've all experienced it. However, everybody else around the country does this. That doesn't mean we have to do it, but we have to make sure that we remain competitive. But what we have to ensure that if you're going to give some type of economic development, you have to have a very specifically defined set of metrics that they have to meet, that they have to have an audit every year so that they can do it. The first thing you have to do to get good economic development is make sure that your own financial house is in order. We have to do that. Each and every one of us in this room have to do that with our own personal budgets. And we've got to do that with Texas. What's discouraging to some degree is there's a lot of talk of they got to cut, they got to cut, they got to cut. We've been doing that at the city of Denton for 5 to 8 years to make sure that we give the taxpayers as much money back as they can. So the first thing we have to do is ensure that Texas is just running on what it needs. Because if you don't know what you need, you don't know what you have to be able to either attract others or to put more into school financing or to put more into rural internet. So economic development is critical. However, you want to make sure that you get the best value for that dollar. And sometimes that's not what happens. It's important that you have that data and analysis and information. You cannot make a decision on economic development without a plethora of data that is accurate and informative. If you do, you're not going to have Tesla come into Austin. Their average job was $35,000 a year. That's good. They paid, I think it was like $15 or $20 million. You've got to make sure that it's worth it. But unfortunately, in the landscape of the nation, you have to find some way to bring people to Texas.
For economic development, we have to make sure that we have the infrastructure throughout the state that everybody can compete. And that means make sure that we have broadband everywhere throughout Texas. We're fighting right now as the PUC is taking away USF funds from companies like Nortex that provides that high-speed broadband into the rural areas. And they're doing it at the bequest of the major companies, major telecoms that don't want to compete with our little co-ops. And we've got to fix that to make sure we have economic development throughout the state. We've got to make sure that when we're looking at these projects, the best dollars we can spend on economic development is the knowledge that we can put in Texans' heads. And that's at the Texas Workforce Commission, at NCTC, at Collin County, at Grayson College, at Vernon College, at Weatherford College. It's the knowledge we put on those guys and gals' heads that makes them skilled workers for each and every business owner that can't be taken away, that's valuable. Where do we find more money of that? We ought to take away the incentives that we give for the film industry and the video game making facility. Because did you know that you pay 80% of the salaries in Round Rock, Texas for the video game makers, and you have to do it year after year after year, and it's wrong. I filed the bills, I filed the amendments to do it, but we have to rise up and say, we're done with that type of welfare, and we need to end it. And then we need to realize that every job in the state of Texas for state government doesn't need to be in Austin. TxDOT pays $56,000 for a clerk with no degree. We closed a 2,000 person building and they built another one. We should have moved 100 of those jobs to Gainesville. We should have moved 200 of them to Wichita Falls or Sherman, where if you paid $40,000 for state benefits, you'd have had to beat them away with the stick rather than seeing 40% of them that leave after 18 months. We need to move state employees around the state.
think the first thing we have to say is what we don't want to do to encourage businesses to move here is we don't want to continue to kick people out of their property so that we can move wealth from one person to another within the domain. That's got to stop. And I also am very strongly of the opinion that, you know, one of the things that's great is the fact that folks want to move here, and the reason they want to move here is because we're not California. And I think the reason that you know, some of the things that are actually in our benefit that we need to do a little bit more on is, for instance, our power grid. You know, in California, there are rolling blackouts out there. That's definitely not going to keep businesses in California. But Texas is also very heavily invested in renewable energy, which is actually fairly unreliable. And so we need to take some steps to basically deal with the situation that, you know, if the wind's not blowing, it's also a heat wave, that we can pull power. There's actually an article that's out recently that was kind of talking about the idea that, you know, we actually have a lot of industry that can produce power, and we can actually kind of tap that and actually, you know, kind of through the legislative process, kind of encourage businesses to be able to push power back up, to be able to keep our grid stable. We absolutely have to keep our power grid independent. I think Texas is really awesome because it's a kind of a closed loop system in so many ways. We have our own power grid. We need to make sure that we keep it that way. Businesses will want to move here, and because, you know, there's only a few states that, you know, kind of offer everything that Texas does. And California is not cutting the mustard, and Texas is, but we need to keep Texas, Texas. That's the main thing we need to do here.
So my top priority in this area is going to be really looking very hard at what deals have been made. There are so many deals under the table that in my journey in Nakona, deal after deal that someone made 5 years ago that they're getting paid under the table to get this people that no one else can come in. You don't have a free market, you don't have a choice. And through my journey of having over 100 properties and scattered all over Dallas-Fort Worth and throughout our district with my different stores, I mean, I'm intersecting corrupt officials that are all on the take. And we need to focus all of that money into our small business and into creating jobs. And we need that money to stay in the hands of people that are going after it every single day. And the amount of waste that keeps getting just shaved off, and you know, this deal was made, that deal was made, is really sickening. And I think, you know, my top priority is going to be really focused on, you know, sniffing out those deals as we move forward on how we're creating jobs, what we're bringing to Texas, and making sure that we are eliminating the opportunity for people to take advantage of Texas and, you know, our money. We need to put all that money coming out of COVID. This is not going to be an easy season to come out of COVID, and make sure that we are focused on high-paying jobs. We are focused on creating new revenue streams, and we are focused on increasing, you know, our opportunities through those partnerships without skimming money off the top. And there is so much of that going on in Austin that I definitely want to make that a top priority. Just that waste alone, through lobbyists, through different politicians taking money for different things. I mean, you know, that used to be called being bribed. And why my freedoms go out the door because someone else gets paid off. That's the problem that we have to get on point and make sure that we're putting all that money back into our workforce, because that's the only way we come out of COVID, as a lot of things are going to change.
Okay, I think a couple things need to happen. I think we need to make sure that we put value back in our schools and get our school districts up and running and make sure that they're favorable. I know when my kids were young, the first thing that I looked at were the schools to make sure that they were top quality and it's somewhere where I wanted my kids to be. I think the second thing is that right now, I would not move to Texas from another state because I'm looking at all these regulations that they have, and I'm like, I wouldn't want to live there because of all these regulations. So I need to make sure that in the future, this will never happen, because as a small business owner, I do not want to get shut down if I move here. So we need to put someone in charge of the state that will never do that, or we make laws that to keep someone from doing that. And honestly, look what Kristi Noem has done with South Dakota. How is she bringing businesses there? When it used to be really cool to say, oh, I live in Texas. People used to say, oh, Texas is so cool. And right now, people are saying, I want to move to South Dakota. South Dakota, y'all. It's because she's on the grandstand for just keeping her state open and saying, my people are responsible enough to take care of themselves. That's what Texas is. That's what Texas used to be. So I want to get back to that. I want to get back to stubborn, smart, personal, responsible Texas, and that will make people want to come here. Thank you.
So that concludes our prepared panel questions. Now, anybody who has a question can come to one of the mics. And I just want to make a statement that I reserve, to maintain fairness, order, and decorum, I reserve the right to modify any questions. Okay? Oh, yes, please introduce yourself, your name, and where you're from, and then let me know if it is for one particular candidate or for all candidates. Oh, you're first.
Thank you. Excuse me, Daniel Bennett. I'm not in this district. I live in District 12. Nelson's my senator. I didn't take any notes, but I want to point out a couple things and ask, because it was mentioned about, Mr. Watts, you're a tax agent. And property taxes were spoken about tonight at length. So I have two questions. One for Mr. Watts and one for the entire panel. First question, Senator Bettencourt had Property Tax Reform Committee in 2016. He's a tax agent. He never disclosed that during those hearings. Do you think that was fair?
And we do need to keep this very short. We only have approximately 20 minutes before their closing statements.
Make sure I understand the question. You asked me if,
Senator Bettencourt's a tax agent. He chaired that committee all over the state of Texas, trying to get a fair tax system. He never once disclosed the fact that he's a tax agent in Harris County. Being a tax agent yourself, do you think that was fair?
well, I think that the state is governed by laws of ethics. Just like if I'm going to be representing something like that, where I've got some kind of interest in a vote that's coming before the city council or even before the legislature, as a senator, I have to disclose those interests based upon state law. So I think you need to make sure that you're as transparent as possible. Now, I know that there was pretty common knowledge, at least I knew about his tax company, but I'm going to leave that up to each individual to make that determination. I will tell you, I would disclose it. Absolutely.
My last question is this.
I'm going to reserve the right for the next person on questions, since you did state that you're not.
That is true.
You're not a
But this-
local resident. Okay, just because we have only a very limited amount of time. So who was next? Okay, go ahead.
Thank y'all for coming. I'm Mark Middleton. I live in Forestburg, which is about 30 miles southwest of here, right on the Cooke County Montague line. But anyway, y'all talked about a lot of things this evening, and certainly there's so many issues that we're facing right now. I think the last 9 months have really drawn out a lot more issues that have been festering underneath the surface. So, you know, as I see it, we have, of course, the property tax issue, which I'm a property owner as well, and I get boiling mad every year when I get my new tax statement. And we have that. We have the school choice, which is important, abortion, which is extremely important, and so forth. Two things that come to my mind, and this is really for everyone, is one, the local official overreach that I know Shelley very publicly had an issue with. I think that is very important for all of us as Texans, but also as we look out across the nation, all of the just absolute lunacy that's going on. So, does anyone actually have a plan to address that specifically? And then also, another issue that has come up that has been around for a long time, that's really becoming more and more critical,
is the child sex trafficking that we're seeing. I know here in Gainesville, there's been a number of busts that local hotel rooms and stuff of sex trafficking, and that is something that should be hypercritical for the state to really get serious on.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that was a lot. Do y'all want to address those in your closing statement, since he addressed all of you at once? And whoever is next on questions, hold on. Whoever is next on questions, if you could just state your name, where you're from, and your question, just due to time. Okay, I'm gonna take a hold.
Being in Dakota, we've dealt with a lot of those issues through our food bank and people coming through, and are very, very, very aware of those issues. So top priority is going to be accountability, and life goes a long ways. There needs to be some accountability. We need to keep the control local, but when those type of things are happening and they're crossing through different counties, we've had a tremendous issue with that. We have a tremendous drug issue, and there's a lot of different people on the tape, and it gets really complicated, and lots of different agencies involved. And so that's something that's very high on my priority list, is putting a good task force that can be very focused on let's make sure and protect our kids, and let's keep them safe. And just putting a little oversight in some of those areas will help. But like I said, top priority will be a task force that really goes after addressing that in all of our counties.
The answer's very short, just pass this to
30 seconds.
30
Yeah.
seconds.
I'll address the first thing that you mentioned. Yeah, I definitely believe that the overreach of the local municipalities, especially, but even higher level than that, over the life of COVID was a significant problem. We need to put some, we need to do some thinking and try to figure out some ways to keep this from happening, because I think we're going to see more and more crazy stuff coming out of Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, and Austin over the next couple of years, and we need to make sure that to some extent they can't sit there and pull some of the stuff that they've been doing and levying $2,000 fines for not having a mask on and whatnot.
As far as the overreach is concerned, I think we just need to dust off the Constitution and take a second look at that. For the sex trafficking, I think we need to remove the masks so we can actually see who people are, and we need to do better work on our border.
Last session we put scores of millions of dollars into sex trafficking because it is one of the sickest and most disgusting things that takes place in Texas. We needed to move more money into the AG's office to give him more power to be able to do that, and I'll fight for that again next session. And then on the overreach, we've got to stop it. That's why we end up coming back and play whack-a-mole. I think we need to look at a broad sweeping bill like $37.99 that I offered last time to make sure that we don't have to keep coming back each and every session playing whack-a-mole.
You cannot do enough to prevent sex trafficking. You have to do everything you can, because those children, they have to be rescued. They have no other voice. It's the voice of people like you who ask us to make sure that we take care of them and put in proper policies and law enforcement. Government overreach. I'm all for the state coming in and providing some policy that's statewide, but what's happening is the state's passing policies to get to Austin and to get these cities that are really creating these kind of liberal situations, but they're hurting Texas cities who don't have those situations. We've got to find a dividing line, but where not one size fits all, and I certainly would do that.
Okay, so we're gonna take from this audience, keep it brief, your name, sorry. Right back to y'all.
My name is Brad Mitchell. I'm from here in Texas. I am from District 30. My question is specifically for Drew. You've represented us for 8 years. 3 of the 5 candidates have mentioned the concept of constitutional permitless carry, and most of us have listened to this for the last 40 years while Texas has lagged behind other states in the nation, specifically Oklahoma. What is your plan, Drew, to move us forward off of this dead stop so that law-abiding citizens can exercise their rights?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brad. And, thank you for your service as a first responder as well. I will file the bill in the Senate. That bill has been filed in the House, and there's been House members that have tried to go forward with it, but nobody in the Senate filed it last session. I'll file the bill that gives that ability to have the constitutional carry, that permitless carry, that gives those Texans that opportunity to do it. You know, in addition to it, you know, we're gonna make sure that we eliminate the gun-free zones. The bills I've filed in the past, we're gonna continue to push for those, for our Second Amendment rights.
Thank you, Drew. Okay, the next person.
I'm John Howland. I'm the precinct chair for precinct 1000 in Sanger, Texas, which is Denton County. My question is, what are you going to do on property taxes for seniors? I'm 75, going on 76 years old. I have paid property taxes for school systems for over 50. Last year, they set the property tax for school systems to 2.5% maximum without going to the voters for more. But there's nothing to stop the prices of homes from going up, and our taxes are going up every year because our house is being escalated. I've had to move from Frisco to Little Elm, now to Sanger, just to keep my property taxes down where I can afford it. We're on a limited budget. I retired in 2004. I can tell you that we've had about 3 cost of living increases that were not consumed by the increase of the cost of Medicare. We're starving to death, and you people need to stop that. Seniors are willing to pay our taxes, but quit raising every year.
Sir, I'm sorry that that's happening to you, and you're absolutely right. I think that, first of all, we need to make sure that the appraisal boards and districts are held accountable. And the one thing that I said was, if we elect them, I think that we can hold them more accountable if they're in elected positions. And that's until we can take care of this property tax issue. If we put a cap on it right away for none of the taxes to be able to raise, including the appraisal, I think that we can start cutting the government spending in all of these frivolous things that they're spending on, because that is the major issue that we have right now. The biggest problem that we have is we have people that pay their mortgage, but then they lose their house because they didn't pay their taxes. And you should own your house, and you actually have the right to life, liberty, and property, but you don't have that in Texas because you pay rent the rest of your life. So dust off the Constitution. Let's get it straight in Texas.
Thanks for your question, John. Yeah, I mentioned before that I am opposed to the idea of property tax, and I think that we need to move away from it. I think there's a couple quick items I think that we need to take in the next session to alleviate the idea that folks are, their property tax is going up 10% a year. That is more than anybody's raised, it's more than you can afford, and the entire process is if you've ever fought your property taxes and go in there and see the folks that are brought in that sit there and work in the Central Appraisal District, a lot of times that they just kind of take their marching orders from one person that's in there. It's not a transparent process, it's very difficult to argue. So I think that's one thing we need to do is move it down to 5% instead of the 10% increase that's possible now. The second thing I think we need to do is we need to have across the board residential exemption in addition to the homestead. I think that the disparity between the way commercial owners are able to dispute their taxes versus residential, it's a wide gap. A lot of times they don't even know what the commercial property sells for, and they can always argue that that comp that they use is not accurate because no one knows what the property sold for in the first place. Residential property is very transparent. We have MLS, and I think that there needs to be some sort of leveling of the playing field. But these are short-term solutions, and my dad is the same situation. His property tax keeps going up. You think that it's supposed to be somehow lodged when you're a senior, and that doesn't really work out that way because there's so many different aspects of it that still go up. The other thing I've mentioned is that we've got to get the school funding ironed out in order, because that's the biggest driver to the increase of your property tax. You've been paying for schools for your entire life. That is ridiculous, and the only way we're going to do this is by getting market forces at work to basically push that school funding increase down, and then do a consumption tax.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Do we need to, this is close to 30 seconds if possible.
So with seniors, top priority for me is, I'd like to see at that threshold that their property tax is frozen, and I'd also like to see the school tax come off. And we've got a lot of work to do. As far as where I'm coming from, I'd like to see property tax drop in half. And that is not going to be an easy thing to do. We're going to find solutions for funding that. But I'm adamant about you work hard your whole life, like my dad has, your property's paid off, and the fact that you get taxed out of that property is absolutely ridiculous. He has no issue paying his fair share, but it needs to, at that point, when you hit retirement, it needs to be frozen, and the school tax needs to come off.
Thank you, John, and let me make sure to be clear that 2.5% cannot be voted to be any higher when it comes to school taxes. That's the 3.5% on local entities where it has to go back to the voters if they go above. We have to come to that consumption tax, that 50%, 100% homestead exemption, to be able to make sure that you're able to do that. Why do we need to go to a consumption tax? Not only is it the most fairest because you control what you spend, but we have illegal aliens that are here in the state reaping the benefits of being in Texas that aren't paying property taxes, and this will get them to pay their share of taxes.
Thank you so much for that question. In the city of Denton, in the county of Denton, they, in the school district as well, have property tax freezes. I think that's one thing we can do immediately in the next legislative session, is to present a bill that would freeze property taxes for seniors. In other words, you're at the level you are when it's enacted, and it cannot go up any more than that, no matter how high your house goes. Those have been left to the local jurisdictions, and if we can't get it through the legislature, then why don't we put it on the ballot to let people vote to freeze seniors' taxes?
I'm gonna stop here. Okay, I believe you're next. Just be mindful of time because we are very short of it right now.
Okay, my name is Jalise Middleton. I am out of Forestburg, Texas. My question is for Drew. You had mentioned that you didn't want to see, you felt like part of the overburden for the prison system was mentally ill people that are being incarcerated. I too agree with you. I work in the health profession here in Gainesville. I do deal with the mentally ill. My question for you is, what plan do you have in place or have you thought about for changing some of the regulations on mental health so that we can have enough providers to meet the needs of these people?
Drew, can you do that in 30 seconds or less?
Thank you. We need to give incentives to incentivize folks to go into that field. We also need to explore the technology with telepsychiatry. But one of the things that we were pushing for last time is to refurbish hospitals like Bowie that has shut down in Memphis, Texas, and turning those into mental health beds so we have a place to send those people rather than letting them sit in jail.
Were you aware that interns do not get paid while doing their internship, and that might also increase that opportunity by making that a paid position working under a clean suit, which is what we do in the medical field?
I'd be happy to look at that.
Thank you.
Okay, and if you can keep it to one question. At this point, we have 5 minutes left and we have several people standing. So quickly, name where you're from and just state your question and to who it's directed.
Ron Spencer, Lake Kiowa, Texas. I'd like to make a statement. One of them is I'd like to see the kids taught the Constitution in our school system. The second thing, the statement I'd like to make is I want to see term limits in Washington State, Washington. And could we introduce some kind of bill or something to where we can get states convention to make that happen?
Okay, is that more of a statement than you wanted to direct? I think we're good. Okay, next.
My name is Tiffany Tillman. I'm from Valley View, and my question is for everyone. The Texas Republican Party Platform Committee added a plank this year calling for the addition to the Texas Bill of Rights to prohibit mandatory vaccinations. Do you agree? And if you do, will you introduce proper legislation to put such an addition before the people of Texas for a vote? That's spoken from a vaccination injured child's mother. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna give each candidate, please answer that quickly, less than 30 seconds if possible. We're gonna start with Chris, and we're just gonna go across the table.
I certainly would be willing to look at that and to look at the data on that, because I think parents have the ultimate choice for their children, whether you're homeschooling, whether you're in public school, to make sure that they have the medical choice on how they want to raise their children and what medical opportunities or what vaccinations they either want to subject them to or do not want to subject them to.
I've consistently supported the rights of parents to choose whether to vaccinate or not, and also on the timetable that they chose to have those vaccines, and I would continue to do so.
I would definitely introduce the bill and make sure that there are no government regulations with that, where the children would still have access to government programs. And I think that COVID, if anything good came out of this, it made people aware of vaccinations. I, for one, will not be getting a COVID vaccination, and I feel like every parent has the right to know what goes in their kid's body. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the flu vaccine has only been the right flu like twice in the last 10 years, something like that. So, yeah, I definitely don't think that the government is competent enough to be able to decide that everybody needs to have certain vaccinations. I definitely would support it. As a homeschool family, I definitely would support any sort of bill that would give parents the right to choose that they get their kids don't have to be vaccinated if they don't want them.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've never been vaccinated. I was always homeschooled, and we always feel like it's our right to choose. And I think we got to keep those rights in our parents' hands, and we've got to really go after that. I know a lot of people that have been damaged through different vaccines, and that's definitely something that I would introduce a bill and go after that to make sure that we have our choice and our freedom is not jeopardized.
I say yay. Okay. Next question.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Vogel. I'm from Montague County. I just had a question for the panel, except maybe Andy Hopper. I think he's made it clear. School choice, what's everyone's position on that?
Once again, I believe everyone has the rights on their kids' education, and I think that's a top priority to keep our freedoms and where you have a choice.
In addition, you already heard my opinion, but in addition, I think we definitely need to support a constitutional amendment that affirms the right of parents to be able to teach their kids and to educate kids the way they see fit.
I'm also for school choice and parental choice and responsibility.
Definitely for school choice, and we need to be able to expand the charter schools that and eliminate the heavy regulations that limit their growth.
How could anybody not be against school choice? Of course I'm for school choice. Parents need to be able to choose where their kids are educated, how they're educated, because you're responsible for their lives in those early stages. So absolutely support school choice.
Thank you. Okay. And your name, question?
I'm Rachel Samick, I'm from Valley View, and my question is, how do you plan on keeping homeschooling private, protected from government regulation? Texas has the best laws about schooling, and we really don't want to change that.
You make it a priority. You make it to ensure that we don't change those laws to hurt homeschooling.
No, I fought for the last 4 sessions to make sure we do not change that homeschoolers continue to have that right to be free from government oversight on those. They've made that choice, and I think it's working marvelously.
I will definitely vote no on any bill that wants the government involved in anything.
You know, as a homeschool family, if you ever try to get your kids into band in the local school district, turns out they have complete authority to let your kids go and participate in band, but in general, they're gonna say absolutely not, we're not gonna let your kids participate for some weird reason. That needs to stop. So, I mean, I definitely think there's no reason to get the state involved in your curriculum, and that never needs to happen. But on the same token, we need to get the schools to stop stonewalling and letting homeschool kids that are already paying taxes from participating in extracurricular activities.
Having been homeschooled and with my siblings, there's 4 of us and gone through that, I've really seen that side of, really having opportunities, and even where I'm at today is because of that, and how we've got to defend those rights. But I've also, in the journey on the other side, seen how important with our teachers in our public school and kids that are in bad households and how we do that. There's a balancing act between defending our rights and making sure that people have good choices. And you really have to look at all of it constructively and go after making sure that there's actually good options and one size doesn't fit all.
Thank you. Okay, so we're really out of time, but I will make your question a brief answer for each one, and then we'll go into the candidates' closing statements after this.
Thank you. I'm Calvin Tillman from Valley View, and you can wrap this up in your final statement if you'd like. Why do you think you're different from the other candidates?
Okay. You want to do a 30? What was the question? What makes you different from the other candidates?
30 seconds or less.
As a businessman, not a politician, I will take every skill that I've learned on efficiency, creating jobs, thinking outside the box, growing communities, having 12 stores scattered throughout Dallas, Tarrant, Denton, through Nakona, having manufacturing arms, having retail arms. And through the food bank, I'm seeing the temperature of what's happening in Texas across a large stratosphere, and I will be focused on moving Texas forward and using those business skills to find waste and use that waste to fund, our police officers, fund our teachers, and create new revenue streams.
I'm an engineer, not a lawyer. I see ways to fix things, and that's kind of the way I look at the world. So I think that would be beneficial. The other thing to say is I was called out by Bud Kennedy at the Star Telegram. I'm apparently the most fringe candidate on the stage here.
So as a citizen or a politician, I was the only candidate that got Governor Abbott to retract an executive order, and I did it twice.
Traveling almost 50,000 miles a year, visiting constituents all over House District 68, shows that I have proven that I go out and listen to folks, take that back, work with both sides of the aisle in Austin for the things that work for this district while protecting our conservative Christian values.
Got me held up. Having served my community for 12 years at the grassroots level, when you serve at that level, when you make a decision that people don't agree with, you hear about it at the grocery store. I mean, how many of you have seen your city council representatives, your school board members in the grocery store, in the restaurant, out in the neighborhoods? But that's really the question you get to answer tonight. What makes us different from one another? I want to serve. I've done it for 12 years. I enjoy helping people, solving problems, and using my extensive business experience and my life experience to do that. And I think, Andy, did you say you're an engineer, not a lawyer? Is that how you said that?
No offense.
Okay, well, I'm a lawyer, not an engineer. I just want to
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you, audience, for participating in the questioning. We wanted to give you that opportunity. So it was decided in advance that they would now give their 3-minute closing statements, and that it would be in the opposite order of their introductions. So we will start with Chris.
Thank you all for holding this forum. Thank the Cooke County Republican Party. Thank you all for coming. It's so good to see people who are concerned and who care about who's going to be electing, who's going to be representing them in Austin. So thank you, and I would still again want to thank all the people here that are running. As a product of public school, when we talk about school choice, I'm all for school choice. But what we want to make sure that we don't want to do is disadvantage anyone the choice that they make. For me, I had to go to public school. There's no way we could have made those choices. And public school is what gave me the educational foundation. But you know what else it gave me? It gave me teachers who really cared for me. Teachers who saw some of the struggles that I had growing up. That they would take me in, they would give me counsel, they would give me mentorship, and help me believe in myself before I could even believe in myself. That's why I served the community for 12 years. That's why I've made it a goal of mine to ensure that I give back to the community of Denton, because they gave to me. They gave to me when I was working at Sonic Drive-In for 10 years. through high school and college to pay some of my family's bills and also to provide for my education. I took one student loan, folks, and I paid it back about 2 years after I graduated. And that's one thing this journey has taught me. It's taught me courage. It's taught me grit. It's taught me resolve. It's also taught me how to be accountable. That when I make a mistake, I can readily admit it. And I think that's why for 12 years I've been able to serve my community, because people come to you. And Drew understands this. They just don't tell you you're doing a good job. Quite frankly, they tell you when they think you're doing a bad job. And you have to be able to hear that. You have to be able to listen. Building a business from the ground up, my mom passed away when I was 22, and after that we were basically orphaned. There was no safety net at all. Building a business, having to make all those financial decisions, having to ensure that the decisions that I made, that I'm the ultimate one that will be accountable for that. I want to be your senator. I can commit to you that your interests and your needs will be my number one priority, as they have been with the citizens in my community. I ask for your vote. If you need more information from me, you can go to my website at wattsforsenate30.com. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks everybody for coming out. Thanks for being an engaged citizen. For those that are watching on Facebook, I appreciate you spending the time to watch this, to learn, to be an educated voter, to know who you want to vote for and why you want to vote for it. You need somebody in Austin that will continue to fight for your conservative values, that will come back out and visit with you, come back out and talk to you. Somebody that you can run into the grocery store, because Chris is right. If you're at Fisher's Meat Market and you're going to be buying summer sausage on Sunday, you'll see me, and I've had plenty of conversations. As Lydia will say, she can time how many people I've talked to about how long it takes me to get back with milk. So it is all about that. It's all about representing y'all. And I think I've done that. And if I've done that well, I hope I would be honored to have your vote. If I haven't done it well, I wish you would have texted me, would have called me. I've given my number out to over 20,000 people inside of this district. And I haven't changed it in 12 years, and I'm not going to change it now. We need to continue to work for those things that we talked about tonight, to make sure that Texas stays conservative. We have a $4.6 billion shortfall. I have voted for 3 budgets since I've been a legislature. Every single one of them was below population and inflation. The first one we had was above it, and I voted no. I got told I would never come back, and I said, you come tell the citizens of HD 68 that they wanted bigger government, and then they could throw me out. And I didn't get thrown out. I'll continue to have that fight for your conservative values, your Christian values, and the things that make this Senate district special. It's why I've already traveled to 57 different events to visit the 10 counties, feels like country sometimes, that I don't represent. And it's been a pleasure to meet each and every single one of those. We share very similar ideas. Somebody will try to pit us between suburban and rural, but we share the desire to make Texas great for our kids and for my grandkid that just snuck out. So, thank you very much. God bless you, and have a great night.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming and thanks for having me. I first want to say this is really personal for me, because not only did I ever think that I would be running for politics, our family's life has been completely flipped upside down. It's not something that I ever thought I would do or grew up thinking that I would do, but when all of these things happened, I felt God leading us through everything. We live in Pilot Point, and when this seat was vacated, it was exactly in the district where I live. And so when that door opened, we felt led to go on this journey, and I've always been a helper. And so I've been doing this since I, got out of jail. I know that sounds weird. I've been helping people. I've been an activist. It's natural for me. I just want you to know that I'm in it for the right reasons, and I'm tough. Everybody's telling me how hard it is down there and how tough you have to be, how strong you have to be. You have to stand up to people, and people are ugly and people are nasty. I don't know anyone that's up there right now that would go to jail to fight for your liberty? No one. And I will do it again and again and again until they understand that the Constitution of the United States is what we stand on. And I don't need to introduce all these other bills until we get to the platform of the Republicans and get those settled and done. All these other bills are a waste of time. We need to go and represent you, what you want, what you think is important, not what I think is important. And you need someone that will stand up to those people that want to give me money, or I'll give you this, I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to get things done. And I'm there to do it for you. I would appreciate your vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. This has been a lot of fun sitting there talking about what we think about things, because like I say, I love talking about that. You know, I am an engineer, and I did take the LSAT and get it in law school, but I didn't. I flirted with it. But anyways, you know, as an engineer, I do see that we have a lot of problems that we solve, like taking the Texas you know, water situation and creating a new 100-year water plan. I see that as an engineering problem. And I think there's a lot of things that we can basically kind of peel back and say, you know what, I think we can fix this stuff and make Texas continue to be the great place it is. You know, the thing that made me kind of interested years ago in figuring out different ways I can serve is when I joined the State Guard, the folks that are in the State Guard are the greatest Texans on the planet. And I'm telling you that my love for Texas, I'm probably expanding here. And the thing is I've always believed that, you know, Texans are more American than Americans are. I mean, we are the absolute top of the heap, and I absolutely want to do everything I can to stand up for the rights of Texans, because, you know, Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution is that Texas is a free and sovereign nation and subject only to the federal government insofar as our local rule is not inherent. Our local rule is unbelievably inherent, and we have to stand up for that. You know, Donald Trump's been working at the swamp from the top, but the thing about it is that we absolutely need to stand up for the swamp from the bottom. And Texans need to be able to decide for themselves whether or not we're going to allow abortion in the state. There's no disagreement there. We have to stand up for it, and the Texas legislature needs to put its big boy pants on, and we need to basically stand up for the federal government. Because the swamp is alive and well. He almost, impeached the guy just a few months back. I mean, we absolutely have to stand up. So I'm very passionate about that. As a small farmer, I'm telling you, I think that Texas and its character is defined by the rural connection that people have to the land. Everyone you know in Texas has somebody that has a ranch out somewhere. And we absolutely have to stand up for that. And I think that we do not have an environment where we're encouraging people to get into agriculture, to get into ranching. We're supporting the big guys, but I don't think there's any argument for not supporting the little guys. And finally, I think that we need to make some very quick improvements to our property tax system, because I think folks are really stressed out, especially after COVID, losing their jobs. We need to make this system better. So, hey, I appreciate you coming out, and I really thank you for letting me speak to you. Appreciate it.
Through this last bit with COVID, I learned a lot about a lot of people. When you're squeezed, that shows what you're made of. And when you go through a hard time like COVID, there's all these unknowns. And my focus through that is I know these are unprecedented times and different things that are forced to shut down. But I took my energy, and we have a strong team. We know what our focus is, and our focus is serving people. And based on our journey of focusing on that Hope 2011, we didn't back down. We didn't close. There's a lot of need. Even though I was threatened with jail time, even though they came out to enforce it, it's back to being strategic on who you surround yourself with, having a group of amazing volunteers that go after it, us being very involved in our community and making sure that Trump is going after draining swamps. And I got to tell you, in a little town like Nakona, I had no idea that there was so much control. And sometimes that control is not intentional. And it's not intentional that people go after. It's always been this way, it's going to be that way. But what happens is you get people that have been there too long. We have to have term limits. And they get too much power, they get too much control. And if you're not with them, they will take you out. They will stomp on anything you're doing. And through our commitment, my wife Leah, who's here tonight, who did two tours in Afghanistan. You know, she's a veteran and focused on serving, you know, our country. We are committed to this district, and you know, our commitment through creating jobs in Nakona. I mean, we live in that factory. Texas Rex was born when we lived in that building. We went after it every day. We went after helping people in the food bank. Our daughter Lux grew up in a 106,000 square foot factory running around. And when my family gets engaged on we are committed to this community, we are committed to this district, we are committed on creating jobs. You know, what I bring to the table from a business side is every dollar matters. And I will absolutely go after stomping on anyone that's wasting our money, deals that are being made, and I will focus on creating tremendous amount of jobs and taking us through COVID. And my journey through COVID, you know, I've opened 2 more boot stores. I launched Nakona Coffee. We bought another building, created jobs there. And everyone I know is going, man, you got to stop, you know, stop. We're scared. We don't know what the future holds. And if we don't keep moving forward as Texans and we keep supporting our manufacturing and supporting our jobs, you know, there is no future and hope. And so I want you to know that, you know, through a hard time when the rest of the world is cowering, I went after it every single day, and I will use that passion in the Senate to go after it every single day and work just as hard as you guys do to make sure that Texas is stronger.
So I am so happy that all of y'all are running, because the more people that run, the more people you involve in your circle, your influence, and the more people that get involved in grassroots politics. As a door knocker in the past, I am just saddened at people who don't vote and don't want to vote. And we have to educate the voters. We have to educate people. If you want to complain, you need to earn the right to complain by getting educated and voting. So thank you to each one of you. We will probably have a runoff, right? Because somebody here on this stage has to get 51%? 50% plus 1? Okay. So, I hope that we will have another function where the finalists will come back to Cooke County. Thank you, Bob, for working all the way through this as being our timekeeper. And I just want to say this, who would have ever thought, I know everybody talks about how crazy 2020 is, but you were born for just such a time as this. God did choose the day that you were born. He does have you living right now for a purpose. You are breathing air for a purpose. So get involved and help. Do something. Cooke County, I'm also vice president for Cooke County Republican Women. I put on the programs for the Women's Club, and we have just as many men meet as we do women. And we meet the first Thursday of every month from 6 to 8. 7. Can't believe I said that. I'm still in the board meeting at 6. Okay, so 7 to, we try to keep it about 8:30, sometimes it's 9, depending on what's going on. And we were not able to meet at First Christian Church, which we have met there for years. So we still don't know. We might be meeting at Cross Timbers Church, who has invited us to have our monthly meetings there, but we hope to see you there. Our whole thing is to educate the voters on the meetings. You're invited. Okay, Chris, you got it.
If you come to the women's meeting, you'll know that I have a final minute at the end of every minute. It kind of teeters on that minute because I don't tell time well, although I am an engineer. As listening to everyone tonight, it dawned on me that I agree with you, Shelley. I will not go to jail for you. I'm too pretty. So, the final thought that I will leave you with tonight is we are Republicans, we are conservatives, and we take care of business. And the reason I tell you that is if you're not out of here by 8:30, whoever's left gets to chip in to pay for the additional rent. Thank you guys so very much for coming tonight. Thank you guys all so very much. We appreciate